We can't tell you how frustrating it was for us to upload our podcast when we first got started. The websites were clunky, we had data limits, and it was all so confusing. That is, until we found Zencastr. Zencastr is an online platform built for podcasters to not only upload their podcasts, track their listeners, connect their audience, and so much more. Zencastr plans have no upload or download limits, so your cost won't grow as you do. Embed their player that automatically updates to show the latest episode of your show. Zencastr lets you see your podcast downloads along with your traffic, website, and Google Analytics. Zencastr also supports multiple podcasts under one account. The best part is, if you already have a podcast on another platform, you can switch to Zencastr with a one-click importer, all free of charge. So what are you waiting for? Head over to howtomakeapodcast.co/Zencastr to start saving time and money with your podcast today.
Hello and welcome to How to Make a Podcast. My name is John Bunn. I'm fired up. It's a good week. I'm joined by my best good buddy, my bald, bearded friend, Mr. Nick Miller. Nick, how are you, man? How's it going?
Well, I'm bald and bearded. So
yeah, you are.
Couldn't be much better, I guess.
I see you're drinking. Is that out of an Oklahoma mug today?
No, I am representing my home state of Missouri. And by home state, I mean where I grew up and I went to high school and stuff, not where I live now. I currently live in Kansas, but I was showing you my Missouri mug because Missouri is the show me state, in case you didn't know that.
That is good. That makes sense. That makes me want to go there. Not really. But, Nick, we had a really cool week last week. I think we should probably mention this.
Definitely.
In our other podcast, How to Film Weddings, we launched a course. And one of the things we talk about, a way to monetize your podcast is with a course. And it did really, really well. We launched this in February before, it generated a lot of revenue. And we didn't know what would happen. We released it again. And let's just say it was a good week. We'll have final numbers soon to be able to chat about stuff like that. But it was a good week for us. So, it's really hard to be in a bad mood over here in podcast land.
Yeah, definitely. So. And when it comes to, we're all about monetizing your podcast and that sort of thing. And for us, we spent a ton of money on, ads and like that kind of thing. So would it have been successful, the course launch, if we didn't have a podcast? That's possible. But the only way we were able to have a successful in my opinion, the biggest reason we've had a successful course launch both of the times we've done it is because we have this podcast that keeps coming back, and people can keep coming back to this free education, this free information that we are giving them. And I think that it's just, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's kind of, you don't know, but we do know that whenever you join the two together, it's a happy relationship. I'll say that.
It works out if your podcast
very, very
is good.
Well. Yes, yes.
That is not what we're talking about today.
No, it is not what we're talking about today.
Oozes.
Maybe someday we'll talk about that later. But today, John, we're talking about interviewing podcast guests. Okay,
yes.
Last week we went through exactly how we sit down and how we record our podcast. And so we wanted to kind of continue on this thread of people asking questions of us in our Facebook group, and this is another one that comes up a lot. How do you interview? How do you do a good interview? How do you record? All of that kind of stuff. We're going to briefly cover a lot of that information today.
Yeah, and we're going to mainly be talking about, because most times the interview's not in the same room, we're going to mainly be, it kind of goes through both, the content we have today talks about interviewing guests just in general, but we've never really had any interview where it was in person. I think we've had a couple of episodes where I had someone in studio with me, but the majority of what we're talking about is people that we're meeting that, thank goodness for technology, especially during COVID, we're able to meet with people all around the world. So the first thing we want to talk about and just reiterate is having guests on your show is a great way to grow your audience. It's the number one way that we took our podcast and made it to where everyone in our industry, the majority of everyone in our industry, knew that we existed.
Yeah, it is a great way to grow. And most people, I think, are willing to just come on like, yeah, man, I'd love to chat with you, talk about that, especially if they have some sort of product or service or something that they sell and your niche is like perfect for them. Okay. They are going to be more likely to come on that. But we will say, as the popularity of podcasts grows, I would put something in your brain to know that I think that we are going to see more and more people, especially bigger names in your niche, request some sort of compensation for coming on your podcast. It's just something that I think the direction that podcasting is going to go. So as of right now, there's probably not many people that are doing that, but again, as podcasting in the next 5 years, it's probably going to be one of the number one ways to consume media in our country. People are going to start charging for that. So just be mindful.
And inside of our course for podcasters, the Podcast Blueprint, we actually break down and show you kinds of people you should be looking for. If they have a smaller audience, they're going to be easier to be available. We just did an interview with Mike McCallowicz. He is an author. He wrote Profit First, and it took almost 2 months to get on the schedule. We worked through his assistant. It was a great interview, but it was very much limited. He did it, for free, but we were able with our audience to say, hey, we've got this big of an audience. So we get way deep into that inside of our course, which is coming back out soon. So be sure to head over to podcastblueprint.co. But today we're going to talk about the actual interview itself. We talked about getting good audio last week, so listen to last week's episode. But I wanted to start, Nick, on how we prepare for a guest, because I think a lot of people don't even know how to find a guest, and then once they do, they don't know how to prepare for the guest. So, Nick, what have we done to find the right guest and to prepare for them?
So one thing that John and I have never done, and out of all of the 100 and now close to between our two podcasts, we're pushing 150 episodes between the two podcasts. And John, I would say when it comes to guests, has gotten 94% of those people on the podcast. He's the one that is interacting with them and talking to them. So when it comes to finding the right guest, one thing we have never done is thrown out a statement, hey, who wants to be on my podcast? Who wants to come on here? Who knows this subject? Fill in the blank. Who can we talk to? Okay, we have never done that, and that's been very purposeful. One of the ways to grow your podcast with a guest is to have an expert, have someone that is a name, have someone that has a following, like that sort of thing. And so if you're just randomly asking people in podcast groups to come on your podcast, unless they are an expert, unless they can back it up with something, that's probably not the right way to go about getting that guest. Okay, so as we are preparing for a guest, we are looking for qualifiers. We are looking for ways that we can actually go in and get to know them and see if they are a right fit for our podcast. Now, some people, we do all this stuff and we thought it would be great, kind of a good relationship between the two, and they flopped. And then other ones, we didn't think it would, like, okay, we'll have this person on, and it turned out to be way better than we thought it would be. But we did homework. We have done homework in finding those guests. It isn't just a willy-nilly, hey, come on if you want to kind of thing.
Yeah. And on the side of doing your homework, once you have established that you're going to have a guest on, they've met the criteria for you to be intentional, we always will go through, their website, their materials. We'll ask them, what types of things they want to talk about, stuff like that. But looking through and knowing who your guest is, just knowing what they're up to, knowing what they're about, go through their Instagram page, go through their Facebook, kind of see what they've been up to. Like, that helps so much in preparing for your guest. The next thing, Nick, is legally you have to be prepared as well. Especially, we have just seen it time and time again with our wedding video business. You don't think something's going to go wrong. You don't sign a contract, you don't do anything legally correct, and it comes back to bite you in the butt. And so legally, there are some easy templates to purchase for contracts. We can link some of those in the show notes, but basically you want to find an attorney to help you draft up something simple, or purchase a template through one of the shops that we'll link or something like that, and then have an attorney just kind of look through it. But having your guests sign something basically saying, hey, I'm going to be on this podcast. I'm allowing them to use me as, to market with my face, to use this information, to put it on their channels. Mm-hmm. And it kind of just sets the scene for legally, you as the podcast host are not connected.
You own control. It's yours.
Protected.
It's your media.
That's the word I was looking for. You're protected. And so that way, Nick, when you think about it, when we first got going, we're having 100, 200 downloads an episode. But now, it's thousands and it's tens of thousands of people listening a month. Somebody might come back to episode 26 or something that was on our podcast and say, hey, I don't want you to be able to use that anymore. They might try to sue you if you get too big. And so from the beginning,
or want compensation.
Bingo. Because we do monetize our YouTube videos. We're getting sponsors paying us. And so sometimes they might come back and say, hey, I want a chunk of this, or I'm going to, take you down or something. So legally you have to be prepared. What's next?
Yeah. And then another thing, and it doesn't have to be super, super deep. It can be as detailed as you want or not, but sending the people you're going to interview some sort of questionnaire is really a good way for you to prepare yourself, and especially getting a questionnaire like at least a week in advance, giving them some time to sit down and fill it out. You have an expert in some subject. Let's say, you have a gardening podcast and you're having this person that's a botanist on, to talk about whatever. And they're a public speaker.
Sounds lit, my friend.
It does. They're a public speaker, and I'm sure that they get the same sorts of questions all the time. Okay, so they are a good gauge of the types of things that they should talk about. So you put in the questionnaire something like, what are some things that you want to talk about? What are some things that come up? What do you feel like you're an expert in? And kind of let them guide that. So as you're putting together your template of your podcast, of your conversation, you are prepared to ask them questions where they can hit a home run. Right? You don't want to try and stump them. You don't want to try and make them look stupid or silly or like ignorant, like they don't know what they're talking about. So you want to ask them questions that they are totally prepared for. We've had really good success. We use this system called Honeybook. So whenever we book a client, someone to come on our podcast, we just send them this questionnaire. It has like 5 questions. We're asking them stuff like, what's your website? What's your Instagram handle? Do you have any products that you want to push? And then what are some things that you're proficient in that you would like to talk about? That's how we do it. You might want to go way more in depth with your questionnaire, but that's how we handle it. And we've had really good success. And John and I are good about, kind of talking and riffing and basing our next questions off of what they're going to say and that sort of thing. We'll get into that in a little bit, but that is how we do our questionnaire.
In those questionnaires, like you said, Nick, it auto generates. Once we have a podcast guest on the calendar, we'll send them a form and contract all through our CRM, and it kind of auto generates. A week beforehand. Here's the questionnaire. The day of that, there's an email that says we're so excited. Here's the link to connect with us and to whatever. Here's how it's going to work. Stuff like that. But that questionnaire is a great thing that we'll have pulled up on our computers while we're talking to them, so we can always go back and we have their website right in front of us, and they're the ones that are putting in the information, so that way that you're not like in this position to where you forget their website name. I know at the beginning we'd be like, what was the website again? Instead of being able to look at our screen and say how to make a podcast.co, we would be able to know that was the place they wanted us to point them to and stuff. And then the last thing before we head to break, I wanted to talk about, Nick, how easy, like we make it easy for them to know what to be thinking about, but to know how to upload or get footage or audio from them. So in that questionnaire, in that sequence of emails that we send them after the episode is over, we have an email that goes out and says, thank you for being on the podcast. Here's what we need. Here's how we need you to upload your audio or your footage, and it just links straight to either a Dropbox file or a server. And you can make that really easy on a website, or you can just send them a link to a Dropbox account that you want them. But just the idea is making it easy for them. And so to recap before we go into break, you want to do your homework. You want to be legally prepared. have questionnaires set up for them, and make it easy for them to upload footage. When we get back, we're going to talk from the break, we're going to talk about preparing your guests to be on the show, and we're going to do that, like I said, right after this break. If you have a pulse, you probably hate the subject of taxes and running the bookkeeping portion of your business. But like it or not, if you want to be a successful podcaster, you are going to have to pay attention to your numbers. But don't worry, we have the answer for you, Core Financial. Our friends over at Core Financial have taken the pressure off of us so we can focus on what we love doing most, running our podcast. They take care of all of our taxes, monthly bookkeeping, financial plans, and make sure we take full advantage of all of the tax benefits we qualify for. It just feels good knowing we aren't going to get a big surprise during tax season. If you are serious about building a business with your podcast, head on over to howtomakeapodcast.co/core to see what they can do for you.
So you've got everything you need for your podcast. You've recorded your audio and video. You're so excited, but wait, you don't know how to master the audio or edit the video of your podcast. We know someone who can help. The podcast editors. Picture this. You record both audio and video for your podcast. You upload it to your remote editor, and a few days later, your podcast is ready for you to upload and push to the world. What will you do with your extra time? Connect with sponsors? Grow your Facebook group? Start that project or even course you have dreamed of for months? The possibilities are endless. We are blown away by the podcast editors and love working with them and using their services. They can edit audio, video, or both for your podcast. Don't get stuck trying to do this on your own. Get in touch with the podcast editors today. If you'd like to save 50% off of your first project, head over to howtomakeapodcast.co/thepodcasteditors.
And we are back from break, and we wanted to start this segment with the question of the day presented by Core Financial. Head on over to howtomakeapodcast.co/core to hear about all they can do for you, for your accounting, your bookkeeping, your finances. It's a great company. We love them. Nick, the question of the day, how do you prepare your guests to be on your show?
Yeah, so this is... I think it's just something that now is kind of second nature to us because we have done it so much. But whenever you're first starting out and you're pulling guests on, you might not know where to begin or where to start. And so the very first thing, is to prepare them to come on is we are connecting with them, asking them if they want to come on the podcast. If that's through Instagram or it's through email or their website. We're just communicating that way and getting everything set up. We are very positive. We are excited that they are coming on. If you in your correspondence are like, oh, I mean, it's cool that you're coming on, but I don't really care. Like, I just have to get an episode out. If that's your attitude, then you're not sending a very good impression to get these people to come onto your podcast. And so linking up beforehand and just letting them know the entire process, by you sending out these emails that are explaining, here's how we'd like to do our podcast. Here's this questionnaire. Here's how you upload all it just shows, it puts you in a good light because it shows how professional you are. It shows that you know what you are doing. Okay. So I know that John, as he connects with people and asking them if they want to be on the podcast, he's constantly, texting or DMing or something like that, and just kind of letting them know kind of how the interview works. And so kind of that's what we do, like leading up to the interview, in constant contact. If we have someone that's on, we're sending them a message, earlier in the week, earlier in that day, hey, we do this by Zoom, make sure you have Zoom downloaded, that sort of thing. And then whenever we actually get to the interview, after we confirm the time and all that kind of stuff, then we do some stuff to kind of make them feel comfortable. So that's kind of phase one of preparing your guests to come on. Would you agree? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I really think that a lot of times people don't put themselves in the shoes of the actual interviewee, and they're not thinking about what it is that, they're like, what are they nervous? Like, how can I make them less nervous? So the more that you can just be confident and have it set up and easy for them. Like, I know that I've been on different podcasts before where they're like, yeah, let's just do 2:30. And like the day of, I'm like, hey, how do I do this? Or how do I, so like Nick was saying, just getting them ready, getting them prepared. That's a huge thing. Yes, Nick.
Yeah. And to that point, you as the listener who hosts a podcast might have done this, 15, 20, 30, 45 times. So to you, it doesn't even cross your mind that you need to explain how to do all this stuff or how you like to do this because you just do it so naturally. But to a person that has never been on one before, like you're like, okay, you want me to do what? Okay, I need to record this. I don't have a recorder. I don't have a microphone. What do I need? So you just need to prepare them and talk to them ahead of time to ease their nerves is a good way to put it.
And then just put yourself in their shoes. Make sure they're communicated to well. Make sure that they know everything they need to know. That confidence that you have in yourself, that's going to go a long way. And then, Nick, fast forwarding to the actual day of the interview, we at that point have a questionnaire filled out. We've put easy information for them in those emails. We have a website link where it just shows them how to record, different things like that. So the day of the interview, we're reaching out saying, hey, excited to chat with you later today. And here's a link. Here's the Zoom link already. We're going to be on there. If we're doing a podcast at noon, we'll tell them we'll be on there around 11:45 whenever they want to jump on. Feel free. And we also say we're going to talk for a little bit beforehand. We're not going to just hit record, and we'll reiterate and get them comfortable. And it is your job as the host to help make them comfortable and make them see that like you're not like you don't want to stress them out. So if you come across stressed, they're going to come across stressed. So I'm always kind of cutting up, making jokes, and I'll say things like, this is really intense, so you better be scared, or like sarcastically, just trying to break the ice, ask them how they're doing, where they at, what's the weather like there right now, how's your business going right now, whatever it is. But just chatting with them. I don't know if any of you out there have been on like a TV show or anything before, or local live, but like several times. I'm really famous in Tulsa, but I've been on the TV shows, and
I bet you
in the
are.
green room. Yeah, in the green room, they'll bring the host in beforehand, and the host sits down and says, "Hey, here's what our segment's going to be. I'm going to ask you these few questions. You say your name this way, you spell it this way. This is correct. Like everything's." And it just kind of eases your nerves. It's like they're like, it's going to be fun. It's not hard. We're going to have a good time. And you're nervous in the green room, but then they come in and you're like, oh, okay. And so having that little chit chat beforehand, just kind of having conversation and then being like, all right, let's just hit record and let's do this. That is a great way to kind of tiptoe them into the conversation so it feels more natural. A lot of people comment on our podcast about how comfortable it is. And from the beginning, I always wanted it to feel like a late night talk show and enjoyable. Like working with some of these celebrities in our industries or experts in our industries and just kind of humanizing them and just like asking them questions that normal people would ask them or whatever, and just making things comfortable. I can't reiterate that enough. Like if you're making it comfortable for them, the interview is going to come across so much better. Yeah, definitely. So that we're always, it's never, okay, you join our podcast Zoom call at noon and we're hitting record at noon and we're just going. Okay. Always take a few minutes to talk, make them feel comfortable. And there's some people that, I think they're really in their head about being on a podcast or something like that. And so they might be really nervous. And so just reassuring them, letting them know it's going to be fine. And then once they just start talking, like they were like, okay, we're just having a conversation. And the only thing that's different is it's being recorded. Like it's just a conversation. And this leads us into our next point about kind of preparing your guests is remind them that it's not live. Like none of our podcasts are live. Like we're not putting it out into the world at the moment that we record it. So we have the ability to edit if we need to. And so if they mess up, it's no big deal. If they say something, that makes them not
present themselves in the best light or something like that. We're like, hey, it's no big deal. We can pause, we can restart, we can do this over, whatever. And that also reassures them a little bit that they know that we kind of care about them and we are looking forward to the product that we are all putting out together. So the more comfortable that they are, the better the interview will be. They won't be fidgety, they won't be upset, they won't be nervous if you make them really, really comfortable. Now, if you don't make them comfortable, if you're kind of standoffish and they can tell that you are, hey, I'm just doing this because I have to get a podcast out, then that is going to come across in the interview. So make them as absolutely comfortable as they can be.
Yeah, that's huge. And we've just seen it time and time again. The more comfortable we make them, the more, that the episode just really hits better and people get more out of it. And so all of that comes into play, whether you're a comedian wanting to interview another, comedian, or wanting just to talk to somebody else, or what, like it really just, your podcast, it works across all kinds of podcasts, just making your guests comfortable. And then Nick, the next thing I'd really like to kind of dive into is the actual interview itself. Now, once we have gotten going, started hitting record, again, we talked about the mics and stuff we used in last week's episode, but we come to the interview prepared with an outline. There's bullet points. We've walked through those bullet points kind of with them beforehand, especially if they're an educator or if they're selling a product. We want to make sure that we let them know, hey, we're going to talk about this thing first, then this, then we'll have a break, then we'll talk about these things, and then we'll finish off with you being able to communicate about your course or your product or your thing or whatever it is. Is this the thing you want to talk about? Is this the right website? So that just gives them more of an ease to the episode, like, okay, this is how it's going to flow, that kind of thing. And then we started implementing breaks just so, like, I remember back in the first 50, 60 episodes or so, like, we just went, and the people that were on the other side, sometimes you could tell, like, is that good? Was that good? They kept asking that, like, during the podcast. And so having a break gives you a chance to just be like, we'll be back right after this break, and then you can talk to them and say, wow, that's going great. Let's hit on this a little bit more. In the next section, we're going to talk about this. And then they can say, did that hit right? Does that make, and like, it's just this really natural thing. But Nick, having the outline for the episode and the bullet points to talk about and not a script has caused our interviews to be the most natural. I know a lot of people try to have like a literal script, and for us, we try to just have some bullet points, maybe like a sub point or two underneath them, but then at that point we just kind of let the conversation, go from there.
And when it comes to flowing naturally, and some of you just might be more like script people, and if that's how you want to do it, that's fine. We have just found with how we are, and with an interview, it's kind of hard to be really, really scripted. And so with flowing naturally, one of the things that takes a while to learn is to actually listen to what your guest is saying, not just paying attention to your notes and reading the next question. Okay? Like, okay, we need to cover this, but you're not listening to what they're saying. They could be giving you some gold, some information. And if you would be actually listening to what they are saying so that you can kind of push that further or say, ooh, that really stood out to me. Would you expound on that more or something like that so you can dig in deeper? That will really, really help with your interview process to listen. Another thing that, I know John got caught up a lot with when we first started going is he would ask the question, but let's say, we would have this is our bullet point, but then there would be 3 sub points under it. And so John would just ask all 3 of those like right away. And the interviewer would be like, okay. And they would answer the first one. They'd be like, okay, but what were the other ones? And what were the other ones? And I've done that too. We have all done that. We all.
Why do you gotta use me as the example? Nick does that all the time too. It's not like I'm the only one. He'll ask a question and then another question and another question,
nope,
and then he'll be like,
"Huh?" It's just you. It's not me.
My bearded friend.
I've learned not to do that anymore. It's only you. So we have learned to ask one question at a time, so that they can think about and process that one question, not to have them overthink it, not to have them go too deep, not to have them lose train of thought of what they are saying because they're thinking of the next question that they have to answer. So just ask them one at a time really helps with the interview as well.
And on the heels of that, like, I think so many times as a podcast host, like, and we've just learned this over time, is we almost would ask the whole question and the answer. Like, we'd ask the question for like 5 minutes instead of just being like, tell us your story. We would be like, hey, why don't you tell us how you got started in wedding filmmaking, where you're at, what got you excited about it, when you started, and how much you're charging now. Instead of just saying, hey, tell us a little bit about your story of how you got into wedding filmmaking, with a more open-ended question, just a simple question that gives them the ability to answer it. And if you have follow-up questions to that, you can always say, oh, okay, and then when did you start? Or, oh, where was it that, like, if they didn't answer something that you were saying. And so asking one question at a time, and as a little sub-point to that, don't ask too much with one question. You just need to ask simple, softball questions where they can knock it out of the park, and you know what answers you're trying to get, what you're trying to pull from them. And so you're kind of teeing it up for them as kind of the guide for the conversation. And I've seen it a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, Nick, is like, we have a guest on and we're educators. And so we have them on and we start trying to educate instead of letting them do their thing. We do all these episodes by ourselves. And for a while, we didn't do episodes just me and Nick. We had guests on every single episode. So we were like trying to teach alongside, and like, it's like, here, you hold up for a second. You're our guest, but we'll talk for a while. And that is something you need to be really careful of as well. And so asking one question at a time, making sure that the question is easy for them, and then following up with extra, follow-up questions is going to be the best way to get the best interview from your podcast.
And then the last thing that you should be looking for with your podcast hosts or guests is ask them if they have anything that they would like to promote, anything they would like to plug, anything like that. Something as simple like this, I'm like, John, it has been so great to have you on my podcast today. I know you are a big podcaster, a big educator. Do you have any resources, anything that could really help my listeners become better podcasts? Do you have anything like that you want to talk about?
Nick, I really appreciate you asking that. I'm just humbled that I got to be on your show, that you're the solo host of your show. I'm so excited to be on it. And honestly, I would just say the best place for people to find out about podcasting would be podcastblueprint.co. Check out there. That'd be the best place to find blah, 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 blah. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And that, good role play, my friend. But
we did a digital high five for those of you just listening, in your
we're
earbuds.
Dorks. It just happens.
Anyways, continue.
More time online with you than anyone in the world, I think so at this point. But that we wanted to make it like, especially if they're coming on for free, we want to make it very obvious to them that we're there to help them grow their audience too. And we'll talk about that in future episodes about like how to grow, even further with these people. But like I said earlier, we wanted it to be a comfortable conversation, and if you think about like Jimmy Fallon or Jay Leno or Dave Letterman or whomever James Corden, whoever you listen to or watch in the late night, they have people on and they do these fun interviews, but they're on for a reason. They're there, they're pushing something, they have a product. And, most people just are like, oh, cool, Taylor Swift is going to be on. Let me listen to an interview. And then she's like, by the way, my new record is out. And you're like, oh, I want to buy that thing. And so the exposure from you and your audience to that person, you're trying your best. And that's one thing that we've really done well with our podcast is making sure our audience has a clear and easy way to connect and grow into their audience as well. And so that synergy really, really helps when growing and interviewing guests.
Yes, absolutely. And we really hope today that this podcast has been helpful for you, for bringing on guests and talking to people and how to onboard potential guests and all of that kind of stuff. So we hope that this was helpful. But what we want you to do, and I know John mentioned it when I threw it up there for him to plug a product, but we do have the podcast blueprint. In the next few weeks, we are going to open up enrollment for that again. So if you would like to get on the wait list, head over to podcastblueprint.co so you can get on there. And as soon as we have any information that comes out about that, you can sign up or to get an email so that you will be notified as soon as that goes live. John, it has been really great to hang out with you again today. And until next time, we'll see you.
See you guys.